Hello everyone, welcome to my another session on types of tests in recruitment and selection. Before I start with this session, let me recapitalize as to what we have done in our previous lectures. In my previous lecture, I was talking about something related with recruitment and selection. Let me reiterate once again that recruitment is nothing but is just the creation of a pool of eligible candidates from where we can select the most appropriate one or the ones whose skills they match with the requirement of the company. When we talk about selection, selection is making a choice amongst all the candidates who have applied for the job, and again we are matching and we are selecting the people who are most suitable. When we were discussing about selection, I had discussed something related with the process of selection. There I discussed with you all that there are basically three stages of selection: the pre-selection, the selection process itself, and the post-selection. Just to give you a brief interview in a bird's eye view, in the case of pre-selection, we discussed something related with that the HR department receives the requisition for the vacancies, then the database is created, and then the filtering of the CVs is done. So, all those CVs which get shortlisted, they are processed for further processing, otherwise they go back to the data bank. During the time of selection process, again we have got something related with the preliminary interview or the selection test. There are different kind of tests that are administered to check the different capabilities of an individual. Then we know there was something which was related with reference checking, medical testing, so on and so forth. Whereas in the case of post-selection, the HR department comes out with the proposal or the offer, and if it is acceptable to the applicant, then the further processing is done, and if it is not acceptable, then again HR department can reconsider the offer, and then the process goes on and on. Now today what I am going to discuss, I am going to talk about the different types of tests that are used in recruitment and selection. As I told you earlier also that it is not possible for the companies to consider all kind of tests or to conduct all kind of tests. They will be doing or they will be conducting the test as per the need of the job and as per the need of the hour. So, when I was talking about selection, I told you that I shall be covering the different type of test in my next session. So, I am here to talk about different types of tests which are used in recruitment and selection. My dear students, it's very essential to understand that at any point of time anything goes wrong, then it will be detrimental to the interest of the company, and then definitely the efforts and the times, they will all go in vain. Hence, it is very imperative that any step, any action which is being taken by the company, it has to be very meticulously planned. If anything is meticulously planned, definitely we can get the desired productivity. And we know, since we are talking about human resource management, we are looking forward for the people who can be the biggest asset to the organization rather than being a burden on the company. So, it is very essential to keep in mind that anybody who is coming and going to join the company, he or she is well tested before they are given an entry in the premises. So, let's start with the different kind of tests that are actually administered during the time of recruitment and selection. At times people they get confused that whether the test is to be conducted at the time of selection or it is at the time of recruitment. It again lies in the hands of the company to make a decision whether they want to do it at the time of recruitment or whether they want to do it at the time of selection. Ideally, the testing part is done during the time of selection only. So, let's proceed. As you can see on the screen, there are different kind of selection tests that are actually administered. The first one happens to be the intelligence test. The second is the aptitude test, personality test, achievement test, simulation test, assessment test, geography test, polygraph test, and integrity test. Now, what happens is that apart from these tests, there can be some other kind of test also. Now, before I proceed with the different types of tests, one has to understand what are the things that are actually tested. Naturally, we are going to test something related with their mental ability, something related with their verbal ability, something related with their spatial ability. Now, what is the meaning of spatial ability? Spatial ability is basically where the person can actually grasp, understand and retain things and can answer the questions. Apart from that spatial ability, at times the selection is also made to test the mathematical ability or to check the short-term memory or the logical reasoning or the pattern recognition. It can be in any form that the test can be administered to the people. We know that once people have actually cleared the first round of selection, we go ahead with the testing. It depends upon the nature of the job. Different types of tests are conducted. Generally, as I told you, generally the main purpose is to assess app, right? So when we talk about app, it is basically related with ability, anything related with aptitude, anything related with personality, so on and so forth. So the tests that you see on the screen also, all these tests, they are some way or the other, you will find they are all related with the ability, aptitude and the personality testing. So let me proceed with the first one. The first one that you can see on the screen is all related with the intelligence test. Now, when we talk about the intelligence test, it's actually related with the traits of intelligence. Now, when we talk about traits of intelligence, it is something which is related with the mental capacity of an individual. So, here in the case of this, so we actually have the mental ability. That means we are again trying to see what would be the mental capacity of a person, whether the person is able to take into the content of the job or no, or how alert the person is, or what would be the numerical ability of a person, how careful the person is, or any other such kind of traits can be measured. The intelligence is probably the most widely administered standardized test in industry. It is taken to judge the numerical skills, reasoning skills and other such abilities. Now, my dear friends, when we talk about the intelligence test, that is very essential. Any person who is coming in the company to join the company, definitely the person has to be judicious enough. The person should be diligent enough to understand what is right, what is wrong. So, that is why we actually administer the intelligence test. Now, there are certain jobs where we require numerical analysis, or maybe we are trying to check the numerical ability of the person, how well the person understands the figure, or what kind of conclusions can be drawn. So, definitely it is the call of the job. It is the call of the job that makes a decision that which kind of test we have to administer. But more or less any person who is doing any kind of test, naturally the person should be intelligent enough to understand the intricacies of the job. So, that is why more or less intelligence tests, they are administered by the company in almost all the sectors. Now, since we are talking about the numerical ability, for example, there are certain jobs related with the analyst past, right? So, there are, like for example, in the media houses, they can be stock analyst, or they can be debenture analyst. There can be different kind of analysts that can perform the task. So, for them it is very, very essential that if the graph is going up or if the graph is going down, how do you interpret, or any figures are mentioned on the screen, how do you interpret and tell the same to the audience. So, such kind of things are actually tested in the case of intelligence test only. The second one that we talk about is related with the aptitude test. It measures whether an individual has the capacity or latent ability to learn a given job if given adequate training. Now, aptitude is very, very essential. Now, what happens is, like, there are people who come and join the company, they have the required skill set. But with changing times and with changing technology, it is very, very imperative that the person is able to grasp new things. So, how do we actually identify that whether the person has the capacity to absorb the new things? So, that is why we check it with the help of aptitude test, that in case if a person is given some kind of training, whether the person will be able to do it or not. So, for example, if there is a software engineer, and if a software engineer, for example, the person knows C++ language, and maybe in later stage, any mechanized software has come, or Dreamweaver or anything like that. So, we are going to check that whether if anything new comes up in the industry, and if we impart little training to the person, whether the person will be able to grasp it or no. So, that is what is known as the aptitude test. That is, we are trying to find out the hidden talent, that in case if we make an effort, whether the candidate or the participant will be able to cope up with it or not. The use of aptitude test is advisable when an applicant has had little or no experience along the line of the job opening. Now it says that there can be people who can join the company who are very novice, they are very new to the company, or they are not aware what has to be done. On the other hand side, there may be applicants who have little experience, those who come with little experience, and they know that the company, that they can identify, they can spot, okay, this is the candidate, in case if I brush them up little, they can shine like anything. So that is why we administer different kind of aptitude tests. So in a nutshell, when we talk about aptitude test is only checking that whether the person has the capacity to learn anything new in future or no, or anything new is given to the person, how the person is going to respond to it. Now, there are different forms of aptitude tests that you can see on the screen. The first one happens to be the mental or intelligent test. Now, they measure the overall intellectual ability of a person and enable to know whether the person has the mental ability to deal with certain problems. Now, my dear friends, when we are working in any company, problems are an inevitable part of any organization. So, if any person is being recruited for any position, whether the top, middle, bottom, so we are trying to check that at any point of time, the person will be able to cope up with the difficulty or problems. Above all, it is very, very essential that whether the person has those decision-making skills or not, because decision-making is actually required at all the times, and basically at time of problem, the person should be very, very smart enough to make decisions. So, how we are going to check that? It is only possible with the help of mental ability test that we conduct. The second one on the screen, which you can see, it's all related with the mechanical aptitude test. Now, they measure the ability of a person to learn a particular type of mechanical work. These tests help to measure specialized technical knowledge and problem solving abilities of the candidate. They are useful in selection of mechanics, maintenance workers, etc. Now, as the word itself is telling us mechanical, it is something technical. For example, if anybody who is a mechanical engineer or anybody who is being recruited as the head of the garage or something like that, there we are trying to identify that in case the person is able to tackle different kind of problems or no. So, this is more of technical in nature. For example, in the initial stages only I was talking about APT, that is we test about the ability, aptitude and personality test. So, this is one of the aptitude tests where we are checking the technical knowledge. So, anybody who's coming for the software job, we can test their technical background. Anybody who's coming for a medical job, we can test something related with their medical aspect. Anybody who's coming for an advocate job, we can test the legalities. So, every job profile has a different mechanical testing part. So, this is more scientific and this is more technical in nature rather than anything else. The third type of aptitude test that you can see on the screen is related with the psychomotor or skill test. Now, they are those which measure a person's ability to do a specific job. Such tests are conducted in respect of semi-skilled and repetitive jobs such as packing, testing and inspection. Now, my dear friends, in any organization when people are working, what is more important? The productivity. So, when we talk about productivity, so productivity is basically what? Productivity is nothing but it's just the combination of efficiency and effectiveness. This is also mentioned in my book only. So, when we are talking about efficiency basically means less loss or damage. And when we are talking about effectiveness, so effectiveness is basically related with the maximum utilization. So, why are we checking the psychomotor testing is used to see people who are into the repetitive jobs. So, we have to see if a person is asked to do any kind of repetitive jobs, there are no losses, no damages. For example, if a person has to be recruited where the person has to do some kind of packing jobs. For example, a person is required to pack around maybe 100 boxes in an hour. So, if the person is doing the packing job and every now and then the packing is not suitable enough or there is some kind of damage or there is some kind of flaw, then that bag or the box will not be complete in its respect. So, that is why we do it with the psychomotor testing or the skill test is administered for the people who are semi-skilled. So, why are we concerned with the efficiency? Because efficiency is directly related with the productivity of an individual. And we all know that from the individual, it is the group, from individual to the group, group to the organization. So at any point of time, the individual productivity goes wrong, definitely the group productivity will also go down, and as a result, the entire organization's productivity will also go down. So it is very, very important that at any point of time, there should not be any loss, there should not be any kind of damage, there should not be any kind of wear and tear, especially from the end of the person's side, right? So that is why we administer the psychomotor test. So above three are the ones which are actually related with the aptitude testing. Again, please remember in mind that all the tests which are administered, it is only for the purpose of three, that is aptitude, ability and personality, and then these different heads can come under it. The next one that we talk about is the personality test. As you can see here, personality test. These assess a candidate's behavior, drives, motivation and values, BDMV, to determine how well they fit in the company and role. Often, an individual who possesses the intelligence, aptitude and experience for certain has failed because of inability to get along with and motivate other people. It is conducted to judge maturity level, social or interpersonal skills, behavior under stress and strain, etc. This test is very much essential in case of selection of sales force, public relations staff, where personality plays a very, very important role. Now, every individual has got different personality traits, right? So, it is very, very important that there cannot be I, me and myself. These three words, they have to be kept at bay once we are in an organization. So, personality test is actually done in order to see what is the kind of motivation the person is having, what is the kind of learning the experience the person is going to have, or the perception level or the motivation level, and how well a person can move on with the others. Because in any organization, it is just not the one person who is going to attain the objectives of the company. It is actually the teamwork or the team effort which is put. So, it is very, very essential that the person is able to get along with the team. So, that is why we check, because everyone has a different personality trait. Some may be very intelligent, some may not be intelligent, some may be short-tempered, some may be very patient, some may be very jovial, some may be very social, some may be very introvert, some may be very, very extrovert. So, that is why we need to check the personality test, and especially personality test is done for the jobs where one has to interact with the other person. For example, the job of a PRO. So, public relation officer. So, if any company is recruiting any public relation officer, the public relation officer has to get along with the other person. Only then the person will be able to understand the problems of the other person. So, that kind of empathy, that kind of connectivity is important. That is why the personality tests are conducted, to see how well the person can get along with the person if the person has to work in a team. Then the next one that we have on screen is all related with the achievement test. Now, achievement test plays a massive role in the education system. Many institutions use these tests to determine if the curriculum has achieved its educational outcomes, if instructional methods are working, and if students are absorbing what's being taught. There are type of standardized assessment format that are used to test an individual's knowledge, skills, proficiency in specific subjects. Now, it's like just in school, when kids go to the school, how they are judged? They are actually judged with the assessment testing. Anybody, it can be in the form of percentages, it can be in the form of grades. So, same is the case for the companies also. If anybody is coming for a specific job, the assessments can be done, how well the person has performed in the previous jobs, what kind of rating the person has scored, or what kind of grade the person has fetched earlier. So, these assessment tests, there is a kind of a set format and people have to follow that format. So, there is a specified standard format in the case of assessment testing, and people follow those standardized format to check their mental capacity, or maybe the aptitude, or maybe the entire intelligence process. So, assessment testing, it can be in the present, it could be in the past also. Anything which you have done in the past, we can always get the ratings, and then we can decide whether the person will be good enough or no. For example, if a candidate is a gold medalist, or if the candidate is a first divisioner, so we know that, okay, if anybody who's first divisioner, it is like, okay, the person is going to be very, very good, because the person will be very, very intelligent. And anybody who has fetched, for example, average marks. So, we know, okay, in case of little training is given to the person can do miracles. So such kind of conclusion can also be drawn. Then the next one which you can see on the screen is all related with the simulation test. A simulation test involves creating a model that mimics the behavior of the real world system or environment to test various scenarios and processes. This can be done using computer software to visualize and interact with the model, allowing for experimentation and analysis without the risk or cost associated with the real world testing. Now, simulation is basically creating the real environment, but you are not in the real environment. There can be some kind of jobs which require simulation testing. For example, if anyone is going for a pilot job. So, if a person is going for a pilot job and if person wants to know the intricacies, then the person can be set up in the artificial environment, and then the person can have the craft, and then all those things can be a part of it. So, simulation is not the real world, but an experience like a real world is created. So, when the experience is created, definitely the company saves on the cost. But in case if a person is going for a pilot job and if a person is asked to fly the plane, and if it crashes or for God forbid, if anything unforeseen happens, then the cost would be incurred by it has to be borne by the company only. So, simulation is more or less the environment is created, and there we are testing that in case if such a situation arises, how the person is going to behave, or if the person is well equipped with the knowledge of flying a craft or not. So, this is just one example of simulation. So, there can be other simulation work also. For example, in the case of management, for example, there are a lot of workshops which are actually organized, and they give you the simulated work experience. For example, I had an opportunity to attend one of such workshops in IIM Ahmedabad around long back when I was studying there. They gave us the example, the real life experience. It was like, for example, they make you into groups, and then they say, okay, if you happen to be a marketing manager, how much you're going to shell out. In case if you happen to be an HR manager, how much you're going to shell out. In case if you're a finance manager, how you're going to take care of it, the expenses or maybe the finances or the budget, so on and so forth. So, without thinking or without giving a second thought, we used to say, all right, sir, this much money would be invested, this much money would be invested, and at the end of it, they used to give us the entire chart saying, see, you invested this much and the profit was this much. You invested this much, but the profit was not good enough. So, such kind of simulation workshops, they actually broaden your mindset. So, with the help of simulation also, we can check the thinking capacity of the person, the decision making capacity of the person, and how well a person can respond to a particular situation. So, that is also one of the type of test which is actually used in recruitment and selection. Simulation tests are used in various fields including engineering, training, business, software development, etc. These steps help in understanding how well a system will perform, identifying potential issues and making informed decision based on simulation outcomes. So, basically it is more of a thinking how well a person can think about a situation, analyze a situation and take actions. So, that is only possible once a person is given a real time experience. At times lot of things they are bookish, but sometimes a lot of things which are practical also. So, this is one of the kind of the test which gives more practical approach to the applicant, and definitely testing can be done in such a manner that if in future something happens like this, how the person is going to respond. Another kind of test that you can see on the screen is the assessment test. An assessment test is designed to measure person's knowledge, skills and competencies in a specific subject area. These tests are commonly used in educational settings to assess how well the students have learned or taught. Assessment test is basically, again, we have already covered that, but again this can be in form of the businesses also, or the people who are living or working at different levels. Next one which you can see on the screen is something which is known as the graphology test. Now, what is the meaning of graphology test? Now, graphology test is nothing, is just the studying of the handwriting. Every individual has a different handwriting, maybe it in Hindi, in English, or maybe in any vernacular language. So, the way the person is going to write certain words, certain statements or any alphabet, right? It can also give us a deep insight about the traits of a personality of a person. So at times companies, if they are not able to identify that whether the person is good enough for the job or no, then they actually administer the graphology test. They want to study their handwriting, and then they can come out with the conclusion whether the person is good enough for the job or whether the person is misfit. So basically in the case of this graphology, as you can see, so here we are going to talk about the degree of energy, inhibitions and spontaneity. So if the handwriting is good enough, or big letters or small letters, then it's like supposing if there are big letters which are, if a person is using very big letters, the very big handwriting, then it means basically that the tendency towards the domination, okay, the person is very dominating and competitive. A slant to the right, it says, okay, moderate pressure and good legibility shows leadership potential. So these are the hidden traits which can be actually identified with the different type of handwriting. So if you're in, so there's a word of caution for you. So you better be careful about your handwriting that you are using. So you don't have to write too big, not too small or slanting. You need to write something common which if anyone is using a graphology test, you're able to clear it. Then we have got something known as the polygraph test. Now we know that polygraph test is nothing but is just a lie detector test. Now at times there can be jobs which are very, very high profile, where the integrity and the fidelity has to be maintained, or at times like if we know that if the person has committed any crime and the person is not apologizing, how to identify. So at that point of time the polygraph testing is done. At times the company can administer the polygraph test in the beginning also, just to identify if the job is very, very high profile, worth a lot of money. Then they can also administer the polygraph test, that okay, whether the person, whatever the person is saying, to what an extent it is correct. So polygraph testing is basically for departmental store, banks, treasury offices and jewelry shops, that is those highly vulnerable to theft or swindling may find polygraph test useful. So anybody who's going for a treasury job or in a banking job where a lot of money is involved, or any jewelry shop, anybody who's being recruited for a big jewelry showroom, then they can administer the polygraph test. Then lastly, we have got something which is known as the integrity test. An integrity test is a type of psychological assessment used to evaluate a person's honesty, reliability and ethical behavior. Now, if anyone who is a part of any company, it is always implied that the person is going to take into cognizance the honesty, the fidelity of the company. That means the person is not going to divulge any confidential data to the outside world. So at times the integrity test they are conducted just to see to what level the person is honest, or what are the ethical consideration the person has, or to what an extent the person is following their ethics. So at that point of time we go for the integrity test. These tests are often used by the employers during the hiring process to predict whether a candidate is likely to engage in dishonest or unethical behavior at work. Please understand, my dear friends, that we want people who are honest, who are loyal, committed, rather than the people who are dishonest. And anyone who is dishonest enters the organization, it can be detrimental to the interest of the company to a big, big extent. So naturally we want to see whether the person is good enough or not, or the person is honest or not. And as I have been talking earlier also, anyone who is honest, anyone who is productive, anyone who is efficient, then definitely there are three words, TRS, right? So there are basically three words that I talk about, TRS. So T is basically for trust, respect and support. So how do we get that trust? It is only when the person is very, very honest, not the dishonest. So in order to check the honesty part, we need people who are not dishonest, who are not going to do any kind of indisciplined activities, so on and so forth. Now, since we have talked about the various kind of tests, but apart from that there can be some other kind of also test which can be conducted, anything which is related with communication, anything which is related with medical, so on and so forth. So what I thought of that I should give you some examples of the different kind of tests. So as you can see on the screen, that there are few examples of tests. For example, the first one happens to be the psychomotor test. So psychomotor test is like basically we are trying to check the spatial ability of the person, the verbal ability, the logical reasoning of the person. So here such kind of questions can be given, and then they can be asked, okay, what will come next in the sequence, or which completes the sequence. So the person is going to understand the diagram or the pattern, and then the person is going to give the answer. Second example, for example of intelligent test. Now intelligent test is more of an IQ testing. Again here such kind of questions can be administered, and then again the person can be asked, okay, which figure is going to be fill up this box, or anything, the pattern, the person has to understand the pattern, and then what kind of black and white boxes have to be filled in. So this is more of an intelligent test, because intelligent test is actually done to find out that whether right or wrong, whether the person is good enough or the person is able to understand, or to actually measure the intellectual ability of the candidate. So we can actually understand whether the candidate is able to possess the mental ability or no. So it is more of a reasoning part, more of the logical reasoning part. Another example of personality test. So as I told you, in the case of personality, we are just trying to figure out that how well the person is going to cope up with one another, or the interpersonal skills, or how well the person gets motivated. So these are the tests which can help us. Because in case if you ask a thief, are you a thief? Nobody will accept it. So if a person says that are you bad at something, nobody will accept it. So we have to beat behind the bush and ask different questions to understand what kind of personality the person is possessing. So for example, I never take things personally, I get nervous before an important event or meeting, or rules should not be broken, I enjoy trying to understand others, I prefer to be left out of the group conversation. So if anyone says that I prefer to be left out of the group conversation, so basically this means the person is not the one who is going to intermingle with everyone. So one has to be very, very careful. Otherwise, if somebody says, okay, I enjoy trying to understand others. So if anyone is trying to understand others, that means, okay, the person is more of social, and the person will be good enough for the jobs where the interaction with the other person, they are involved. On the other hand side, for example, if I want to know what kind of the person is, like tends to be disorganized, compassionate, soft-hearted, or is relaxed, handles stress well. So this is like tends to be lazy, stays optimistic after experiencing a problem. So these are the factors which can actually give us. So any person who is filling up these responses, then there are psychiatrists sitting in big companies to understand what kind of a personality the person is going to hold. Then see, this was the example of simulation test that I was talking about when I was explaining the simulation test. So in the case of simulation test also, the artificial environment is created for the person, and then the real experience is being given, and then we can identify that, okay, if a person is coming for a pilot job and if the situation is like this, how the person is going to react. So this is more of a technical aspect testing which is actually done. Then this is the example of a polygraph test, a lie detector test, as I told you. So we want to check the integrity, again the honesty part of the people before they join the company. So this is there's a kind of an equipment which is done, and then the person is sitting, then the reactions can be recorded, and then with the help of those we can interpret whether the person is lying or whether the person is not lying, or in future if the person is recruited, will he lie or will he not lie. Now coming on to this slide, you can say like what is the criteria for choosing a test. Now there are so many tests which are there. So again, as I told you, it all depends upon the company to make a decision what kind of test they want to administer, because they cannot administer all kind of tests for all kind of jobs. There may be some jobs where it is for the semi-skilled people, there it is for the skilled people. So the decision has to be taken. So what are the criteria that we keep into mind? So definitely the test, like more or less they are administered in most of the organization. For example, there should be reliability, validity, standardization and objectivity. So when we talk about reliability, so reliability is a concept which talks about that, okay, the result should be consistent. It should be the same. It should be the same. So for example, if you see a person scores 200 points in March, would get somewhere around 200 if tested in July. So the results are consistent. You are getting the same result every time you are doing it. So for example, if a patient is there, So if a lie detector test, for example, is administered, so if we know that okay, in the lie detector test, it's proved that person is lying. So even if that test is administered after 5 minutes also, we are going to get the same result. So consistency basically means getting the same results or near to that, but there cannot be a lot of vast difference. Then second is something which is known as validity. Now validity is basically means that the test is measuring what it intends to measure. For example, if you have got a thermometer, so the work of a thermometer is to measure temperature, right? So if the person is measuring, if the thermometer is being used to measure the temperature, so the work of a thermometer is to measure temperature, body temperature, but it cannot measure how much water is there in the milk. So in that same case, any test which is being used, it should measure what it intends to measure, because there are different kind of tests. So at times there are intelligent tests, there are memory tests, there are personality tests, there are verbal reasoning tests. So example, if any intelligent test is administered to check the intelligence level, then it should not measure the memory. That is what it means with the validity. Then we have something which is known as the standardization, as you can see on the screen. When a test is administered at standard conditions to a large group of persons who are the representatives of individuals. So that is the standardized test. That is okay, that test can be administered to large number of people, and it says that the main motive of any standardization is to arrive at some standard so that the test score becomes more meaningful. So the standard part has to be maintained during the time of testing. And lastly, it talks about the objectivity. We should get same conclusions only, then the test is said to be objective. So that was the criteria of selecting the test. I hope the different kind of tests, they are clear to you. Thank you so much and stay tuned for my next lecture.